and just as the plane landed, the nose gear embedded in the snow and the plane went over on its back. The first thought I had was, I've been very foolish.
Ice is more than frozen water. It can act like a vault, locking away landscapes, artifacts, and even life for decades or tens of thousands of years. In this countdown, we'll move from Antarctica to the Arctic and back again, following 15 unusual discoveries that were preserved, concealed, or revealed by ice. Some of these discoveries rewrote scientific history. Others were never meant to be found at all. 15. A mountain range hidden beneath Antarctica. In 1958, a Soviet expedition uncovered evidence of an entire mountain range buried under roughly 600 meters of Antarctic ice. Known as the Gomburtsov mountain range, it's enormous, stretching about 1,250 kilometers, with peaks reaching around 3,390 meters. In scale, it's comparable to the European Alps, but because it sits deep under ice in an extremely remote location, scientists still know very little about its detailed features. 14. Gold revealed by melting glaciers. Gold is usually found underground, but glaciers have helped move it across the surface. During the last ice age, glaciers transported gold-bearing rocks. Some of that material became frozen inside the ice. Often the gold is dispersed as sediment, but as glaciers melt, especially under continued global warming, glacial streams can carry higher volumes of gold. That may open short windows where prospectors can find significant deposits if their timing is right. 13. A new dinosaur species in Antarctica. In 1986, Argentinian geologist Eduardo Olivero and Roberto Scasso were on an expedition to James Ross Island in Antarctica when they found dinosaur bones beneath the ice. The remains belonged to an ankylosaur. Excavation was slow and difficult due to ground frost and harsh weather, taking about a decade. The fossil turned out to represent a new species, now called Antarctopelta, Antarctic shield. To this day, that single fossil remains the only known specimen of the species ever found. 12. Yucca, the exceptionally preserved mammoth. In 2010, Siberian tusk hunters discovered an Ice Age relic in extraordinary condition, a woolly mammoth known as Yucca. She lived about 39,000 years ago and likely died after falling into a swamp and becoming stuck. That position, and the freezing conditions that followed, preserved her body so well that scientists were able to extract blood that was still flowing. Researchers found mammoth blood has a natural antifreeze-like property. Yucca is now displayed in Moscow. 11. A box of jewels in the ice. In 2013, a French alpinist hiking on the Mont Blanc Glacier spotted a metal box embedded in the ice. It was labeled Made in India. Inside were about 100 colorful gems, sapphires, emeralds, and rubies. Investigators later determined the jewels came from an Air India crash dating to either 1950 or 1966. Authorities tried to identify the original owner, but couldn't. In the end, the jewels were split in half between the alpinist and the owners of the land, leaving the alpinist with roughly $340,000. 10. Grasshoppers, frozen into a glacier. At first glance, this glacier looks completely ordinary. What's trapped inside it tells a very different story. In Montana's Beartooth Mountains, within Custer National Forest, there's a glacier that looks unlike most others. Grasshopper Glacier has a grayish tone because it contains tens of millions of locusts frozen inside. How did they get there? One leading theory is that centuries ago, a migrating swarm, possibly billions, crossed the Rocky Mountains and was trapped by a massive winter storm. The ice then formed around the insects, preserving them over time. The glacier drew scientific attention after geologist J.P. Kimball identified it in the early 1900s. In 1914, Kimball sent insect samples to the U.S. Bureau of Entomology, which identified them as Rocky Mountain locusts, a species that went extinct more than a century ago, likely because farmers plowing overran their breeding grounds in the American West. Grasshopper Glacier is not the only glacier to contain insects. Until the late 20th century, frozen grasshopper remains were fairly common, but lower snowfall rates since the late 1980s and higher temperatures have melted many similar glaciers. Visiting Grasshopper Glacier is difficult. Part of the route requires an off-road vehicle, followed by several hours of hiking, often in poor weather. Because of conditions, it's generally considered accessible only from late July through September. 9. Allen Hills 84001 and the Mars Life Controversy. For a brief moment, this object made scientists question whether we were truly alone. Allen Hills 84001 is one of the most famous meteorites ever found. Discovered in Antarctica's Allen Hills ice field in 1984, the 1.9-kilogram igneous rock is thought to have crystallized from magma on Mars about 4.2 billion years ago. It was later shocked and altered, possibly by one or more impacts. The common timeline is that it formed as part of Mars's crust about 4 billion years ago, remained there until roughly 17 million years ago, and was blasted into space after an asteroid hit Mars. After traveling for a long time, it landed in Antarctica about 13,000 years ago. In 1996, NASA scientists reported microscopic and chemical findings suggesting that carbonate grains in the meteorite might have been produced or used by Martian microorganisms. The carbonate grains were associated with organic compounds and contained tiny iron mineral crystals similar in size and shape to those produced by bacteria. If true, it would have been strong evidence that Mars once hosted life. But later studies challenged the claim, arguing the carbonate grains could be explained by non-biological processes. In 2022, an authoritative report in the journal Science concluded the carbonate grains were not signs of life and were instead formed by water. Even so, there is still scientific evidence suggesting Mars may once have been hospitable to life, though given the planet's current state, the chance of finding life on Mars today is considered extremely low. Allen Hills 84701 can be visited at the Smithsonian National Museum of Natural History. 8. A baby mammoth preserved in Yukon permafrost. The Yukon is known for gold deposits, and in June 2022, miner Travis Moudry was working to extract some when he made an unexpected discovery. Because the mines are covered in permafrost, he was digging into hard frozen ground. Inside, he spotted a dark shiny animal with short legs. At first, he suspected a mummified baby buffalo until he noticed a trunk. What followed stopped an entire mining operation in its tracks. Moudry showed his boss, work stopped, and experts were called. Yukon government paleontologist Grant Zazula couldn't arrive immediately, so he sent 2 geologists. They rushed to the creek, surveyed the site, and retrieved the remains less than an hour before a storm struck. The mammoth was wrapped in a tarp and brought to a nearby location for a ceremony attended by scientists, miners, politicians, and First Nations elders. The elders offered a blessing and named the mammoth Nunchoga, meaning big baby animal in their language. A quick examination suggested Nunchoga was female and likely about a month old when she died more than 30,000 years ago. Based on where she was found, researchers believe she was grazing with her mother, strayed, and became stuck in mud. Her preservation is linked to the Yukon's permafrost, which acts like a freezer, preserving soft tissues such as muscle, skin, and hair, along with information like DNA. That's why miners in recent decades have also uncovered well-preserved remains of other animals, including a wolf pup, a caribou calf, and giant camels. Nunchoga is considered the first complete baby woolly mammoth found in North America, and only the second complete specimen found anywhere in the world, making her discovery both rare and scientifically significant. 7. A C-53 Skytrooper. Dakota on the Gauley Glacier. This next discovery wasn't ancient, but it survived conditions that should have destroyed it. On November 18, 1946, a C-53 Skytrooper Dakota took off from Tolnan Air Base near Vienna, Austria, bound for Pisa in northern Italy. The aircraft carried several high-ranking Allied officers and their families. To avoid bad weather, Captain Ralph Tate Jr. chose a cautious 2-day route through Munich and Marseille. But near Innsbruck, the plane ran into bad weather anyway. The pilots became disoriented and went off course. Tate dodged several mountain peaks and knew they were in the Alps, but the crew mistakenly believed they were in the French Alps rather than the Austrian Alps. At one point, a downdraft pushed the aircraft toward another peak. To save everyone on board, Tate intentionally brought the plane down, pancaking it onto the Gauley Glacier. The aircraft skidded uphill on its belly and got stuck in a snowbank, stopping a few hundred meters short of a deep crevasse. The good news? Everyone survived, and the only serious injury was a compound leg fracture. The bad news? 12 people were stranded about 3,200 meters up in the Alps in late November. The radio still worked, but signals deflected off the mountains, and search aircraft didn't pick it up. It took 3 days for US and British Air Forces to locate the plane. Some accounts say the final spotting was made by the captain's father after a flare was launched, with the help of local Swiss Alpine soldiers. All passengers were rescued. The aircraft was left on the glacier and largely forgotten until 2012, when 3 Canadian university students hiking there found the C-53's propeller protruding from the ice. As the glacier continues to melt, more remnants are likely to surface. 6. A giant hole in Antarctica's winter sea ice. In October 2017, scientists saw something unusual. A massive hole opened in the middle of Antarctica's winter sea ice. It was atypical and enormous. Researchers identified it as a polynya. In essence, a polynya can form because deep water in parts of the Southern Ocean is warmer and saltier than surface water. At times, currents bring that warmer water upward, melting the ice blanket on the ocean's surface and creating an opening. Once open, the exposed water stays in contact with the atmosphere, making it difficult for new ice layers to form. While the basic process is understood, this event raised questions. Polynya openings often occur near coasts, where sea ice is close to open water. In this case, the polynya formed deep in the interior, puzzling scientists. There's still uncertainty about long-term environmental impacts and whether polynyas can seriously harm local ecosystems. Some have suggested a link to climate change, though that has not been definitively proven. Using satellites, autonomous floats, and data from tagged marine animals, researchers concluded that a turbulent eddy around Maudrise brought more salt into the region. That salt was transferred toward the surface through Ekman transport. They also determined that polynyas formed this way can affect ocean circulation, changing how water moves and how currents carry heat toward Antarctica. 5. Iron Age skis in Norway. In 2014, researchers found a single ancient ski in a Norwegian national park. 7 years later, a matching ski was found a few meters away, preserved in even better condition. Skis have a long history. Archaeological evidence suggests hunters in Europe and Asia used skis near the end of the last ice age, around 11,000 years ago. The oldest confirmed ski, found in Russia, is about 8,000 years old. In Scandinavia, wooden skis and ski-like artifacts have been dated as far back as 3200 BC. The Norwegian pair is believed to be about 1,300 years old. What makes it stand out is the condition and the detail. The skis measure roughly 188 centimeters long and about 18 centimeters wide, with the second ski slightly larger. Archaeologist Lars Pillow of Norway's Glacier Archaeology Program noted the skis are handmade, not mass-produced, and each would have its own long history of wear and repair, so they should not be expected to be identical. Both skis have raised footholds, leather straps, and twisted birch bark bindings that would have been attached through holes in the footholds. Researchers believe the owner was a hunter, a traveler, or both. The discovery also suggests the high mountains of southern Norway, though remote, were active and heavily used 1,300 years ago. After the first ski was found, the team wondered whether its underside once had fur lining for grip. But the second ski appeared to have a groove like those found on some other ancient and modern skis. A groove would have no purpose if covered with fur, leading researchers to conclude these skis likely did not include fur lining. 4. Ancient viruses preserved in permafrost. Some things frozen in ice are better left untouched. It's now clear that viruses can survive under ice for thousands of years. What remains unclear is how many ancient viruses are still frozen and how many have already been released as permafrost thaws. So far, scientists have focused on permafrost viruses that infect amoebas, single-celled organisms, because these viruses are considered harmless and serve as a model for what might be lurking under the ice. Computational biologist Jean-Michel Claverie has stated that scientists will not risk isolating a virus capable of infecting modern mammals. There's no formal proof that viruses beyond amoeba-specific ones can survive for so long, but he argues there is no reason they could not, since viruses share the property of being inert particles outside host cells. The risk of triggering an unknown pandemic, he says, is not worth proving a point. Among the safe viruses identified is Pithovirus cybericum, considered one of the largest viruses ever found. It's about 1.5 millimeters long, thick-walled and oval, with an opening at one end, a cork-like cap, and a honeycomb-like grid. It was discovered in a core of ancient Siberian permafrost in Russia's Far East and is believed to be about 30,000 years old. A second virus, Mollifi iris-sibiricum, was found in the same 30,000-year-old sample. It's slightly smaller and protected by a hairy outer layer. When it infects an amoeba, it can produce and release about 200 to 300 new viral particles for every single virus. The oldest permafrost virus identified so far is Pandoravirus yedoma, dated to about 48,500 years ago. Found in icy deposits in Russia's Far East, it has a large egg-shaped particle measuring about 1 micrometer in length. These discoveries are scientifically fascinating, but the variability of viruses also suggests that some dormant pathogens could be dangerous. If thawing continues, it raises the possibility that a future outbreak could begin in northern regions and spread south before much of the world is prepared. For that reason, monitoring newly identified Arctic viruses is considered important. 3. Glacier Girl. The plane recovered from Greenland's ice. On July 15, 1942, 6 P-38 Lightning fighters and 2 B-17 Flying Fortress bombers were flying from Greenland to the British Isles when they were caught in a blizzard. They turned back and made an emergency landing on Greenland's glaciers. All crew members were rescued 9 days later, but the aircraft were left behind. Over time, shifting ice sheets buried them under roughly 75 to 90 meters of ice. 50 years later, an effort began to recover one of the P-38s, nicknamed Glacier Girl. The project was massive. It took about 11 years and cost around $2 million. The team used a large heat plate to melt ice and tunnel down to the aircraft, then cleared a cavern around it with hot water so pieces could be brought to the surface. The plane was in decent condition overall. The canopy had been crushed, but most parts remained in place. After roughly $500,000 in repairs, Glacier Girl returned to the air in October 2002. On June 26, 2007, the aircraft attempted to complete the flight it had begun 65 years earlier, departing from Teterboro Airport in New Jersey and aiming to cross the Atlantic to Duxford, England. But on June 28, a coolant leak in the right engine forced it down in Goose Bay, in northeastern Canada. The recovery inspired hopes of retrieving another aircraft. In 2011, a new search effort used drones with ground-penetrating radar to detect one of the remaining P-38s, identified as a plane known to its pilots as Echo. As of 2018, plans called for a 2019 excavation using the same heating method used in 1992, but there has been no clear confirmation online that the second recovery actually happened. 2. Ötzi, the oldest natural mummy in Europe. This discovery preserved not just a body, but the final days of a human life. In 1991, 2 German tourists hiking in the Ötztal Alps on the border of Austria and Italy found human remains emerging from ice. After recovery, the body was examined at the University of Innsbruck and soon became known as Ötzi. Researchers determined he was the oldest natural mummy in Europe. Dating placed him between 3350 and 310 BC, more than 5,000 years ago. He should have decomposed, but the cold alpine conditions preserved him unusually well. Scientists identified many details. Ötzi was about 5 feet 2 inches tall, left-handed, wore a size 8 shoe and had brown eyes, dark brown hair, and tanned skin, features interpreted as indicating Southern European heritage, despite being found in the Alps. His health appeared poor. He was lactose intolerant, had a rare genetic anomaly that prevented his 12th pair of ribs from forming, and suffered from cavities, intestinal parasites, Lyme disease, and pain in his back, knees, hips, and shoulders, suggesting a life lived with chronic discomfort. Even so, he traveled through the Alps, and evidence suggests his final journey was urgent. His belongings indicated warm clothing but limited supplies, a backpack, an axe, a dagger, a bow, arrows, and a small amount of food, suggesting he was hunting and gathering as he crossed the terrain. Although examined in Austria, Ötzi and his equipment are now in Italy due to geopolitical border definitions. The Treaty of Saint-Germain-en-Laye in 1919 defined the Austria-Italy border along watershed lines, but glacier retreat complicated the exact location. Surveys in 1991 concluded that while the discovery site drained to Austria, the body was about 93 meters inside Italy. Both sides handled the issue civilly. Innsbruck completed the scientific work, and since 1998, Ötzi has been displayed at Italy's South Tyrol Museum of Archaeology. 1. The HMS Investigator and the Search for Franklin's Lost Expedition. In 1848, Sir John Franklin officially disappeared in the Arctic. As a well-known explorer, his disappearance caused widespread concern, and Britain organized search parties and offered large rewards. At the time, Britain was heavily focused on finding the Northwest Passage, a route through the Arctic that could connect the Atlantic to the Pacific. With no Panama Canal yet, ships often had to sail around the southern tip of South America, a long and dangerous journey. A Northwest Passage promised faster, safer shipping. Franklin's expedition was one attempt to find it. In 1845, Franklin, then 59, departed with 2 ships, HMS Erebus and HMS Terror. Problems began immediately. Food was improperly sealed and contaminated with lead. The crew survived the winter of 1845 to 46, but in 1846 the ships became stuck in ice. Although they should have had 3 years of provisions, contamination made much of it inedible. After 2 years with no news, Franklin's wife pressed the British Admiralty to search. Those missions found little. The key written evidence was the Victory Point note, written in 2 parts, describing the crew trapped in ice from 1846 to 1848. The second part reported that Franklin died on June 11, 1847, and the note may have been written by survivors as late as 1848. For many historians, the missing ships were the ultimate objective. Inuit oral history indicated the location had been known for a time. Inuit accounts describe using an abandoned ship as a source of copper and iron, but that didn't last. After about a year, the ship reportedly sank, and the exact location became uncertain. In July 2010, Parks Canada sent scientists and surveyors to search. On July 25th, after breaking ice, the team tested an underwater scanner and by chance found a ship in the very test area. It was not Erebus or Terror. It was HMS Investigator, a ship that had searched for Franklin in 1853 and later became trapped in ice and sank. Because the wreck appeared on the first test run, the initial discovery took only minutes, allowing the team time to photograph and assess the wreck. The find encouraged further searches. In 2014, Parks Canada located HMS Erebus, and in 2016, they found HMS Terror using the same general technology. Excavations have begun on Erebus, and hundreds of artifacts have been recovered. A final note is geopolitical. The discovery of these ships strengthens Canada's historical and geographic claim to the Northwest Passage, emphasizing that British and by inheritance Canadian ships were operating in the region in the mid-1800s, long before American claims connected to Alaska. From that perspective, U.S. assertions over the passage are seen as weakly supported and at times disingenuous. And this isn't the end of what the ice is hiding. Ice preserves what time would normally erase, sometimes bones, sometimes machines, sometimes entire stories. And as glaciers melt and permafrost thaws, more of that hidden record is likely to surface, revealing new discoveries and raising new questions about what has been sealed away for so long. If you enjoyed this documentary and want more carefully researched, long-form stories like this, make sure to subscribe to Rapid Rank. It helps the channel grow and ensures you never miss future deep dives into history, science, and the unexplained. Thanks for watching.